Logistics.
And now it's going the other way. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sustainiacs. I am Michael Vincent. I'm always here, and I've got a new friend. I hope he's pretty cool. Noah Sorin. We've been talking for a little bit. We've been trying to get this together, and it's just been today it almost derailed us again, my brother. I don't. It's going to be a great show when you have to put this much effort to try and actually get the recording done, man.
For
Well,
sure.
how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm kicking butt. I'm ready for Labor Day weekend. I am excited about this show. I'm excited about a lot of things lately. I think
Right on.
that there's a lot of people who are doing things in the right way, right? And really trying to. I call it living with intention, right? That there's responsible capitalism or conscious capitalism or doing something with their talents that doesn't just extract wealth; it actually improves society in some way. And how the heck did we get introduced? And let's talk about this for a little bit. What are you doing there at what is it's Idori, right? Idori, and
Yes, Idori.
and you're the founder. If you didn't know, you found the place, and then they slapped the CEO label. So not only did you cause this, it is all your fault. You can't deny it. So, what? Tell us what you're doing, man. Tell us what's
Yeah,
going on.
absolutely. So, just to introduce a little bit of background about myself, I originally grew up in Montgomery, Vermont, on an organic vegetable farm where I spent pretty much the entirety of my childhood
Wow. So
outdoors.
you're an inner city kid.
No, no, no. I was outside camping, kayaking, snowboarding with my family every day, every weekend. And it really
Fantastic.
granted me a deep, deep appreciation for the natural world. And when I moved to Boston to go to Boston University about 5 years ago, I realized how privileged I was to have those opportunities. And it's actually the reason that I care so much about sustainability and environmental conservation is because I have such an intimate and meaningful relationship with nature that's been long standing and deeply embedded in my life ever since I was a child. But the sad reality is that the majority of kids don't grow up with 20 acres in their backyard or a giant garden or the opportunity to go snowboarding every weekend or go fishing every weekend. So it was because of that that I wanted to provide more opportunities for people to relate to nature, connect to nature, learn about its beauty, learn about its magic, and learn about the importance of protecting it in a more accessible way from within any home, no matter your background, no matter your income level, no matter how close you are to a forest or to a beach. I wanted to make sure that it was accessible for people to understand how beautiful nature is and how interconnected all living things are. So that's why I started Idori, which stands for I Dream of Real Impact. In high school, I had a passion for creative writing, specifically poetry and storytelling, and I used that to write a children's book called Benji the Tree Hopper. This is our
That's
first
it.
self-published book.
Go to Adori.com, right? And you can find this.
Yes, go to
Yeah, yeah,
adori.com
yeah.
and you can get one right now. They're printed on 100% bamboo paper. We try to make everything as sustainably as possible in alignment with
Is
our
that is
mission.
that is that Benji behind you over your left shoulder?
Yes, we have a few different iterations of Benji. So
Oh, okay, cool.
this is the most recent one. This is Benji the Tree
I
Hopper.
love it.
Benji's made from 100% organic cotton and kapok fiber, so he's biodegradable. He has these unique little sleeves in his arms, which was actually designed by a behavioral psychologist and someone who minored in toy design. And it allows kids to stick their arms in the arms, which allows them to hug Benji. They can act out different things that happens in the book, and it makes it a lot more of a meaningful and interactive experience opposed to just a traditional plush toy.
That's
I really
cool.
loved puppets growing up, and I remember we had some puppets that we would act out different parts of our children's books too. So I wanted to include that in our products
My
as well.
wife absolutely loves puppets.
Me too, me too.
I
It's
mean,
such
to
a
this day, if there's a puppet show, she's going. She loves puppets.
Yeah, and I think that part
Absolutely.
of it is that it's not just about communicating a story about the importance of conservation to kids. It's really inviting kids to be a part of the narrative and to understand that they play a role, a very important role in the conservation of our planet, in the everyday decisions that they make. So, simple things like adding little puppet arms to Benji so they can act out parts of the book just makes them feel more involved in the journey and makes them understand that this is
Yeah.
something that they're actually a part of too. They're not just reading about it, they're actually living it. And I think that that's something that's really important.
Now, that's just the first book. There's a trilogy so far, right?
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah.
our first book is Benji the Tree Hopper, which introduces kids to deforestation and talks about the balance between cutting down trees in certain situations and also reducing, reusing, and recycling when possible. Our second and
Responsible
third books,
management, like forestry
yeah,
management. And
yeah.
yeah.
Specifically talking about how it's not always evil or diabolical to cut down trees. Sometimes we have to build houses for our families or to clear room
Well,
to grow food for our families. But it's all about balance, and it's all about understanding what is reasonable and what is unreasonable.
that's really interesting to me because a number of years ago, we were interviewing on a different podcast that I used to be involved with. We were interviewing and we were talking about the logistics of trees, of Christmas trees. Okay. And people were talking about how real Christmas trees are actually better for the environment than buying fake ones because of the turnover, the trees, the tree farms that are there, and all that kind of stuff. Not only just the waste and the plastics and stuff like that from the fake trees, but it is actually a good environmental thing to responsibly grow and harvest trees if you do it the right way.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. I mean, I think about it too. Like, there's a lot of companies, specifically up in like British Columbia, for example. There are companies that will actually pay people to plant trees, and often these
Yeah,
companies are connected to the forestry companies that are cutting down trees. So some people are
sure.
like, "Oh, is it really planting trees if they're just going to get cut down anyway?" And I absolutely still think that that's valuable and important to the environment because not only are those trees sequestering carbon while they're growing along the way, but they're also supporting homes for different species and promoting biodiversity. And it also is like ecosystems are very complex and interconnected webs. And I think that adding more native species in any specific area often benefits a wide range of kind of different parts of the ecosystem web.
Yeah. I mean, within that, even harvesting, right? I was talking to a guy at a previous show. You can look it up though, but it was talking about cacao farms in South America and Africa, and teaching them about sustainable growth and harvesting of the cacao trees, right? And how they have to be, if you plant them too close together, then the ecosystem around them doesn't flourish, and then the trees don't flourish as well, right? So understanding how to actually grow them in nature that is the most beneficial for nature and the actual harvest you're looking for is important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when it comes to helping children specifically, helping all people connect with nature, there's really kind of three ways that we can learn. We can learn about nature, we can learn from nature, or we can learn with nature. And when we're learning about nature, that's like learning about these are different kinds of trees. This is what an acorn is. This is, what a food web looks like. Learning from nature is saying like, okay, if trees share resources from the areas that have lots to the areas that don't have a lot, maybe we can embody that or do something similar in our culture, in our society. But what I think is like the most meaningful and the one that's ultimately able to drive the most impact is learning with nature and understanding that nature can really be your co-researcher in life and that you're navigating this chaotic and confusing world and nature's also navigating this chaotic and confusing world, and it's about working together and creating synergies that benefit everyone and everything. And I think that um, oftentimes in capitalism, we think about a zero sum game where every time there's a certain amount of winners, there has to be a certain amount of losers. But in nature, and this is something that's really beautiful, I think that there's a network effect where the better off that one group does doesn't mean that the worse off another group does. Sometimes the better off that one group does means the better off that another group does in the same ecosystem. And I think that that's something that I really want to teach through my literature and through Idori as a brand is that we need to collaborate and we need to stop being such a competitive society, and we need to work together to create solutions that are conducive to all of us and conducive to all life on earth.
From your lips to God's ears and everybody else. God, amen, bro. I mean, in every aspect of her life, we need to get back to that, dude. I mean, if just turn on the news, bro, we gotta get back to that in a
Absolutely.
bad way. So there's other books there too, and we can get into those. But I wanted to. Is the company all about just the books,
No,
or
no,
there's
not
more
at
to it,
all.
right? I mean, you're not just on here peddling a book. There's a whole mission behind what you're doing. Let's
Yeah,
talk about that.
absolutely. So, Adori, I dream of real impact. The impact that I dream of is a world where every child has opportunities, no matter their background, to connect with nature in an intimate and meaningful way and understand the importance of protecting it and what they can actually do in their day-to-day lives to protect it. And I started with a children's book because it was something that is incredibly accessible. It's very easy for different people through their school, through their library, through their classroom, through their family to get access to a children's book opposed to snowboarding lessons or a fishing boat and all the gear that comes along with that or the travel that comes along with that. But
Yeah,
a book in itself is not going to change the world. It's not going to shift the paradigm away from our existing relationship with nature. So what I've started to do is I've started to think about Adori from two different ways. One is kind of like the bottom up approach, where I think about how can I impact each individual child the most. And this includes me going into local schools, libraries, bookstores, and doing readings, leading environmental enrichment programming. I've also started to work on doing some professional development where I work with other educators in classrooms to help them understand how to teach kids about sustainability using age appropriate language and using activities that are interactive and engaging for that specific age range. And then the other
yeah.
side of it, the top down of thinking, how do I reach as many people as possible and really kind of get the word out there that this is something that's important and something that people are going to want to start following. And that's where I start using the physical products, the branding, the books, the plushies, the online content that I record. And I would say at its core, really what I'm trying to do is similar to that of what Sesame Street is trying to do, of using these relatable and fun characters like Elmo and Big Bird, making them relatable and interesting, and then also using them as a platform for social emotional learning, for teaching kids about math, literacy, vocabulary. And I think that that's really powerful because the kids don't see Sesame Street as an educational platform. They see it as a fun brand. They see it as their toys. They see it as their
Yeah, that's
friends.
right.
And in all subliminally, they're learning about how to respect each other and how to treat each other and how to count and how to spell different words. And I think that that's ultimately what I'm trying to do with Adori. I'm trying to create fun, relatable characters that children will fall in love with, develop friendships with, have adventures with, and then use those characters to help children understand that nature is beautiful and important and needs to be protected, and these are the things that we should all be doing in our day-to-day lives to help respect and take care of the planet.
One of the things that and thank you for that. One of the things that I noticed when I go through this, and I love this fact, is you can't find anywhere where you're telling people this is evil or not to do that, or you know what I'm saying? It's a very positive message. It's not anti-industrial. It's not anti-capitalism. It's not anti this or anti that. It is just pro. Let's take care of nature because that's what we should do, right? Here are the benefits from a good nature. Because, in reality, nature is going to be here. We're not going to destroy nature. It's going to be here. We just might change it to where we can't survive in it. I mean, that's the real part, right? And that's the reality. But it doesn't even go that far in your teaching and stuff like that, like this shock and scare, like scared straight type of stuff. It's just teaching the right value, in my opinion, and many others, the right values on how to just, like you said, respectfully interact with nature, because we are part of nature, and we seem to like remove ourselves from that because we think we're so smart, I guess, or that we think our intelligence makes us above everybody else. It gives us the ability to control everything else, but doesn't necessarily make us above everything else, right?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. One of the things I was interested in when you said, you came from Vermont, and not the fact that you came from Vermont, but the environment that you grew up in, and then you went to Boston College, which is obviously not like going to Nebraska or Oklahoma or somewhere. I mean, you're in you said Boston, or not Boston? Was it Boston College? Were you an Eagle?
Boston
Is that what you said?
University.
Boston University. That's what it was. I was thinking I was wrong when I said Boston College. It's a city school. did you, what were your, do you see social interaction differences from people who grew up like yourself and people who grew up in the city? Do you
Yeah.
see different? And I'm interested on what your take is with that and how that kind of works, right? Because they have different fond memories of concrete and right. I mean, it's not necessarily they have negative, right?
Yeah,
Where
totally.
they go,
I think I think the two biggest culture shocks for me were one, people's relationships with food and the food chain, and then
oh
two,
wow,
people's hobbies and the fact that there were people who didn't have any hobbies that had to do with outdoor activities. So,
that
growing up in
confused
such a
you.
small town in Montgomery, Vermont, there's not a lot of people to meet. I think there's somewhere between like 900 and 1,200 people in my town,
Yeah,
more cows than human beings. And
yeah.
most people, for their hobbies, either like to go fishing, like to go snowboarding, like to go hiking, because those are the activities that are readily available. There's not a ton of movie theaters and places to go karting and bars, and there's not a lot of those activities, but there is a ton of beautiful nature. There's places to go cliff jumping, there's places to go paddle boarding, there's places to do anything you can imagine in the great green mountains of Vermont. So coming to Boston and meeting people who had completely different hobbies, had grown up, flying drones or spending most of their time playing video games, was really a culture shock for me to be like, wow, some people really didn't spend much time outside in their childhood, and why would they care about sustainability? They've never had any reason to care about nature because they were never given
Yeah,
any reason to care about
they
nature.
never understood it. They don't know how it impacts their lives, right? They
Yeah, and
don't
they
have
were
any
so
relation.
separated from it. Nature always sounded like something that was so distant and far away. For me, I could see it right out my window. I opened my door, I saw nature, but when people live in suburbs, when people live in concrete jungles, it doesn't necessarily feel that way. And then the other thing that was incredibly shocking to me was people's relationship with the food chain. Because where I grew up in Vermont, it's not uncommon that people hunt for their own food. People go deer hunting, people go turkey hunting. It's not uncommon for people to grow some of their own food. A lot of peoples that just recreationally garden still end up growing enough that they're actually, able to contribute to their groceries and food needs for the month just from their garden. And I met a lot of people right when I moved to Boston who had never even, grown a tomato plant before. And I think that it became very obvious when I started seeing a lot of other people's relationships with food waste. Because when you garden, when you spend an entire summer bending your back over weeding to get a few ripe tomatoes, you're not going to
You
waste any
use
of
them.
those tomatoes. It
Yeah,
really
you
shows you
use them.
kind of like all of the work and love and care that goes into even just growing one piece of fruit. And you're you get a deeper appreciation for it, so you're less likely to waste it. Whereas, if you just grow up having it readily available at the grocery store anytime you want to go buy something, then, and obviously like income level also plays a role in that. But I think that
It
people
does, but it's. I was just going to say that that's an interesting perspective because income level does play a role in that, but it still is a different relationship. Even if, like the lower income that may value that food more, it's still not the same relationship
yeah.
as as you're talking about, right? Because it's you go find it somewhere else. You get it, or you eat what's available, right? Like we talk about food deserts, and there's food deserts for different types of food too, right? Like in the inner cities and so on and so forth. Like you can't readily get just fresh vegetables, unprocessed foods, right? It's just not readily available to certain aspects of the society, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. So, does your education platform kind of try to address that type of thing to because if you give this to me, I see it. I didn't grow up in Montgomery, Vermont. I grew up in Mentor, Ohio, and it's a suburb. But I grew up on the lake. I've spent a lot of time on the lake. I grew up. We had probably a couple 100-acre woods behind us and a swamp, and I spent my whole summers everything out in the woods with nature and everything else like that. Right. So not like quite like you did, but I understand it. And there are farms around us when I was growing up and doing all that kind of stuff, Amish country, all that kind of thing, right? Not inner city by any means. But So I get this. I get this. How do you relate that to kids who and people who are now, because you're reaching out to the next generation and you're growing them, right? Is what you're doing. You're really trying to help mold and educate the future stewards of the earth, right? Of our environment. I mean that's what you're doing.
Yep.
How how do you make it relatable to those who are never going to fish or hunt for their own food or even farm? You know, who grew up in a brownstone on Boston Commons and or Maverick Square in East Boston, and are going to get a job there and never leave the inner city.
Yeah,
How do you connect with that person, and what can they actually do?
absolutely. So I'll start with kind of like two different answers to this. So the first
Yeah,
answer is coming from more of a parenting perspective of
yeah,
why aren't parents already focused on teaching all their kids about sustainability? For a lot of us, we know that sustainability is something that's important. We know that protecting our environment is something that's generally should be a priority. But if I have a 3 year old or a 4 year old, what are some of the obstacles or barriers that would prevent me from teaching them about deforestation or plastic pollution or air pollution or something like that? And
yeah.
in the customer discovery that I did and talking to over 100 parents over the course of the past few years, what I really learned is that it's often seen as too complicated, too time consuming, and too anxiety inducing. So that means that parents already have a lot going on. They have so much to worry about. And, making sure that their kid's not getting bullied, making sure that their kid is getting fed, getting enough sleep, getting potty trained. That's a lot of stuff to worry about. And sustainability
Mm,
often just falls too low on the list. So the first solution is we have to make it as easy as possible for parents to introduce these concepts to kids. So we have to be in the mainstream toys. We have to be in the mainstream content. The more accessible it is, the less parents have to think about it, the easier it will be for them to include that in their child's day-to-day learning. The
mm,
second thing is that it's too complicated. And this is kind of like a fallacy that a lot of people just don't understand how intelligent young children are,
mm,
specifically in early childhood. And I don't think
mm.
that as a society we give them enough credit. There's an incredible amount of research and data out there that like the fastest our brain ever develops in our entire life is between 0 to 5 years old. Yet we invest 1/100th of our education spending into early childhood education, and we invest
Mm.
billions and billions of dollars into higher education, which is still meaningful. And I'm not saying that that's not important, but I'm saying we need to be investing more into our children, and because they're super smart and they can understand things. So making
Mm.
sure that the language is age appropriate is important, but also making sure that we're giving kids enough credit to understand things that they are actually capable of understanding.
Yeah,
So
taking the language to the age appropriate doesn't mean the concepts have to be dumbed down. Is what you're
exactly,
saying, right?
that's a very good way of putting it. And then
Yeah.
the third piece is it can't be anxiety inducing. We live in a terrifying world with where, every
Yeah.
day we're getting world news rings on our phones that another horrible thing has happened. And it's really taking a toll on our mental health. And we can't deny that future generations are going to continue to grow up with cell phones and the internet and access to way too much news at all times. And because of that, we're prone to a lot of anxiety, and parents, especially, don't want to add on to that at all. So,
Mm.
adding on, telling their kid that our oceans are filling with plastic, that fish populations are dying off, that global warming is going to melt the ice caps, parents don't want to do that and make it more anxiety inducing. So, I think
Amen. Yeah.
a huge part of our focus and our branding is to be completely climate optimistic and say, hey, our planet is so beautiful. Let's make sure we take care of it so it can stay beautiful. Not saying our planet is dying, so we need to do something right now, but really just helping kids understand that trees are really special and they do a lot for us. They give us the food that we eat, they give us the air that we breathe, they give us a playground that we can climb, they give us so much. And all we have to do is give a little bit back and take care of them a little bit, and not cut all of them down, not pollute the forests where they grow and contaminate the soil so that they can't grow anymore. And I think that the second piece of this, which is really, really important, of how do I actually connect to those people who won't have access to gardens or don't have access to that big backyard, is finding a way to bring it to their backyard and to make it relatable. And what I mean by that is I grew up with parents that loved hugging trees. So to me, it was never weird to walk up to a tree and hug a tree. And, it might even be harder for some kids to conceptualize what it would even mean to hug the ocean or to hug the air that we breathe and that is all around us. But it's really easy for kids to hug a plush toy. In fact, when I started interviewing a lot of little kids and asking them about like what they care about in terms of sustainability, I used some different age appropriate language. Every kid cares so much about at least one endangered species, because the idea that something that they probably have had as a stuffed toy, something they've cuddled with, something that they've played games with, had tea parties with, is in trouble, really pulls their heartstrings and makes them want to care. But not every kid has hugged a tree or hugged the ocean. So when they hear about the island of plastic in the Pacific, or when they hear about trees getting cut down, it doesn't pull on that same heartstring. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what Benji is designed to do, is to help kids understand that they can emotionally connect, maybe not to a tree itself, maybe that'll take a few steps, but they can definitely emotionally connect to Benji, who stands for the trees, who represents the trees, who symbolically is the forest, a personification of our beautiful forests on planet Earth. And if kids
Not to be
develop a
confused
positive
with the
relationship
Lorax,
with Benji,
right? But
they'll
he's
develop.
not the Lorax. It's Benji.
Yes, he's not.
I
The
speak for the
He's not the
trees.
Lorax, but the Lorax is definitely.
A
Let's just say the
distant
Lorax
relative.
and Benji would be really good buddies, and
Yeah, they would. They would definitely be giving you.
Benji definitely sees the Lorax as a mentor, and as an
Absolutely, like sensei, maybe sensei. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to me that you use the word tree hugger, or not tree. You didn't say tree hugger, but you said my parents would. They love to hug trees, which in my mind I went, oh, they're tree huggers, right? Which has negative connotations in certain aspects, and that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. Right? Is the kind of we have these movements that occur right from time to time. These social movements. Somebody gets outraged over something, and they start a movement to try and get it fixed. And a lot of, no matter what it is, doesn't matter what it is, wages, blah blah blah, doesn't matter. Environment, Greta Thunberg, whatever it happens to be, right? And they start out really well intentioned, and they could be really impactful. But then you have people that hijack it and create it into this ideology that pulls it in one polarizing direction or another, right? And it seems like sustainability has had that occur. And it seems like maybe it's separating again now as people understand the true definition of the word and what has been perceived as a bastardization of that or a hijacking of that really are the same thing. And they really are positive for every aspect of not only life and society, but business, right? Do, do you see that? And I mean, when you say hugging the ocean, obviously you can go up and hug a tree, right? And I've done that, and I've done it by mistake skiing sometimes because they don't move. People don't do that when you're snowboarding. And if you're going to go on trails and actually do actual trails, which I learned how to do, make sure you know how to ski or know how to snowboard before you do it, because it is incredibly dangerous. But you're talking about someone loving a tree, right? And I love trees. I climbed trees. I built forts in trees. I took care of trees. I did all that stuff. We had a garden. We did all that kind of fun stuff. That's what you're talking about, right? When you say hugging the ocean, hugging the tree, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm talking about it in a very literal sense. I mean, I know it's kind of
Yeah,
funny that you mentioned that, because I've actually spoken with a lot of advisors in the past,
sure.
and at one point I was planning on naming Benji the tree hugger, but because of all of the associations with tree huggers, I decided I wanted to just come up with something more original and
Well, you got to soften it and reintroduce it, is what
more
I'm
and more
saying, because
unique.
it's been
Yeah,
hijacked. It's been
it,
hijacked, right?
it's
It's not
totally
a
been
bad
hijacked,
thing.
and I think
Yeah,
I'm really glad that you brought this up, actually, because this is something that I've really kind of wrestled with over the course of the past few years, is how do I take a strong stance that our
right.
environment needs to be a priority while also not coming off as political or not coming off as controversial, because I want to be inclusive to everyone, because I think everyone needs to be a part of this
And it's not
mission.
only political or divisive. It's a threat to certain people. They feel like it's a threat to their industry or to their livelihood, right? And it's not
Yes,
a
and
threatening thing at all.
I agree with that, but I also think that there's a lot of rhetoric that goes around that is maybe misconstrued, because I think, like, for example, if we look at a big oil company, and I'm not going to name a specific one, but just picture whatever, wherever you stop to get your gasoline, think of that company. And a lot of people really villainize and demonize these companies because of the lobbying that they do to, reduce like policy on carbon emissions, and
Yeah.
that's really
So
bad
they
for
can
our
get more.
environment.
They can get
But these
more, extract
these
more
same
raw
companies are
materials. Yeah.
also among the world leaders in investing in renewable energy. And I'm not defending these companies. I'm simply saying that there's often more of a complex picture than people are willing to take the time to fully understand. And I think that oftentimes where a lot of the controversy, where a lot of the ideology, as you put it, comes from, is when people try to oversimplify what it means to be sustainable and what it means to take care of our planet. Because the reality is it's incredibly complicated. And, to say that we need to stop using oil would also say that we need to, like reduce or limit access to electricity for millions of people, and that's less access to things that allow us to live healthy and happy lives. And I'm not asking people to relinquish that convenience, and that's not the purpose of Idori. It's not to villainize capitalism. The purpose of Idori is this very, very simple idea that nature is completely beautiful and magical, and every child has the capacity to recognize that beauty and that magic. And as long as someone is able to kind of help push them a little bit in the right direction and help them see that magic and that beauty, they're going to care about protecting it on their own. Because if someone understands, like I understand, how trees talk to each other and how they release pheromones into the air that literally make humans happier and induce serotonin and dopamine release in the human brain, then they would understand that trees are definitely something we want to protect and take care of.
Mm,
But so
yeah.
many people don't quite understand all of that beauty or all of that magic. They haven't seen it firsthand. They didn't read about it. They haven't been informed. And because of that, they don't understand why it's so important to take care of it. But I think
Yeah.
that that idea is completely unpolitical. And anyone who tries to make that political doesn't get the bigger picture of what we're really talking about. And I think that
Yeah.
I'm not trying to tell people what the right behaviors are, because I know that it's really complicated. I know that, depending on how many uses you get with your tote bag, if you only use it 4 or 5 times, then maybe a plastic bag would be more sustainable in that situation based on the water usage and the energy usage. And I'm not trying to
Yeah.
tell people,
Yeah.
oh,
Paper grocery bags versus plastic grocery bags. The plastic ones are
exactly.
actually
So I'm not
better for
telling
the
people tote
environment.
bag
Yeah.
versus plastic bag. I'm telling
Yeah.
people,
Yeah. Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
our oceans are really important, and I want you to actually think about what bag you're using before you buy it, because it's going to impact the ocean. And I want you to
100%.
go do your own research and make your own informed decisions with the best interest of the ocean in mind, because you
Yeah.
understand that we need to protect the ocean, because the ocean has inherent value to us, to the world, to everyone and everything, just because it exists, because it's alive, and because it's full of beauty and full of magic, much like I
Yeah.
believe about all nature.
Yeah, it's fantastic. One of the most eye-opening things, just real quick, I want to just jump on with the trees and the dopamine and the pheromone and how they actually do. And you said communicate, because they actually do. I've seen and I've read the studies over the last year of how if you're in the bush and you threaten a certain portion of that bush, whether it be by fire or cutting it down or anything like that, the trees actually do communicate that a threat is coming. They don't go, "Hey, buddy, watch out! You got to move." But they communicate, and they will actually start to prepare themselves that something is coming. Now, this is not this conscious type of thing that's going on, but they are. They do physically communicate that stuff is going on as well, even to that deep of a level. Um, Let me ask you this: what you're saying here is fantastic, and I love every aspect of it, because I agree
Thank you.
100%. It's one of the reasons I started this podcast. Was just one, I wanted to get into sustainability, because 36 years in business, I wanted to take my knowledge in logistics and apply it to something that was worthwhile. And I saw this as being very, very worthwhile. That there's this offshoot of sustainability going way off towards this ideology that it needs to be brought back, because this is actually how we should be living. This is actually really what should be being done. And the fact that industry success, happiness, life, convenience, um, quality of life, all these things, and then sustainability and taking care of the planet and hugging trees are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they have to be together. There's a yin and yang there that has to occur. Otherwise, you tip the scales, and that's not good. You agree with that statement?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it doesn't come without compromise. I will say, if you like the convenience of being able to, order a package and get it on your doorstep within 48 hours, and you're ordering 10 different packages a week, I can't say that we're going to be able to find a sustainable way for everyone on the planet to have access.
Yeah, there's you absolutely, and that's the yin and the yang. There's good, there's bad, and there's things that happen. But I've argued this in logistics, which I'm part of that universe, is that the consumer never demanded that. Marketing companies figured out how to gain market share by offering it, and then convinced the consumers that they had to have it right now, that instant convenience. And you
Yeah.
don't. You absolutely do not have to order and have a drone deliver your coffee to you. You don't have to. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no Uber Eats in Vermont where I'm from, so I grew
Probably
up.
not. Well, you might be able to go down and pick something off of an Amish wagon. I mean, where I grew up, you could, go a few miles and get an apple pie off the back of a wagon, but you have to go get it yourself. That's as close as Uber Eats when I was growing up was having
Yeah, I also think, it's interesting. Like, if we were to survey everyone in the United States or everyone in the world and ask them if they would rather have Uber Eats and Instacart or trees, to see what percent of people would say what, because, I'm nervous that perhaps too many people would answer that they would rather have the convenience of Uber Eats and Instacart without really understanding, how much.
In my opinion, if a grown adult actually makes the choice, even one, that's too many. Because I mean, that's just, to me, that just makes no sense whatsoever. That's just like no sense. Let me ask you this: this is, your formative years, and you're physically, it's proven your brain is growing when you say 0 to 5 years old, and so on and so forth. And you set this tone. When you get past this, which is a great foundation, how how do we, and do you have, maybe you're not allowed to spill the secret sauce, or not, or the tea, I guess. Um, shouldn't this carry on? Shouldn't there be a greater effort to teach this as you get into business schools and entrepreneurship and so on, all the way to like PhD level courses that aren't just like, I mean, there's PhD courses out there. Obviously there's ocean, and you can, ocean biography, or biology, and all this other kind of things that you can study. But I'm talking about interaction of business and sustainability. Shouldn't this be more mainstream, more main track in higher secondary, and so on, higher education? As you know,
Absolutely. I 100%, I am a firm believer that the environment and nature should be a core pillar of our education system just as much as math, humanities, social studies, physical education. I think that understanding how the natural world works, and I'm not talking about taking a biology class your freshman year of high
yeah,
school.
right? That's what I'm
I'm
saying. I mean,
saying
there
that,
are all those things. This is different.
exactly. I'm saying that throughout our entire education, we should be learning about the plants and animals that exist within our local ecosystems. We should be learning about how weather works and how the global food chain works, and we should really be understanding our impact. And I think that, people learn about the water cycle and people get some basic kind of science concepts that also touch on some sustainability and conservation
Yeah,
concepts growing up, but it's not the same as understanding what our personal impact on the planet is. And I think that that's a really huge missing piece. So the learning framework that I've actually designed, the one that I take into schools when I go in and work with classrooms, has 5 steps to it. And I believe that this is like
ooh,
the 5 critical steps in order to make any child develop into an environmental steward. And I think,
are you gonna unveil them right now?
yes, right now,
Fantastic! I love it. Let's hear it.
first and foremost is gratitude. In order for anyone to care about anything, they have to have some level of appreciation for it. Understand that it has meaning, understand that it has value. Because if they don't appreciate it, then they're not going to give you the time of day and nothing else will matter. So it starts with gratitude. Then it goes learning. So first we have to learn, like, nature is beautiful. It's important. It gives us the food that we eat, the air that we breathe. It gives us these beautiful creatures that we love. It gives us the materials that we need to build our houses and all of these amazing knickknacks that we now take for granted these days. And then the learning part is we need to learn that it's not infinite, that there are challenges that come along with taking advantage of the environment. And it's okay to sometimes cut down some trees to build a house, but if we cut down all the trees to build houses, what would happen? What would happen to the animals? What would happen to the plants? What would happen to us? And I think it's really important for people to understand that, even from an early age, and not in a
Mm-hmm.
pessimistic perspective of like, oh, we're going to use all of Earth's resources and then everyone's going to die. No, of just understanding that, oh, here's a tree that grows food. And if we cut it down and use it to build this other thing, we're going to have this other thing, but we're no longer going to have the food that it grows. And I think
Yeah.
that
So how do we do both?
really understanding that there's give and there's take in nature and the environment, I think is really
Yeah.
important. And understanding that, like, I think it's crazy that a lot of people don't understand that plastic bottles might take 500 to 1,000 years to decompose until they're in middle school or high school, yet they might have already consumed thousands of plastic bottles in their life by that point. So that person has
Yeah.
now contributed thousands of bottles that will exist for 500 to 1,000 years to our global waste problem without even understanding that plastic lasts that long. That's not a flaw in
Yeah.
the individual. That's a flaw in the system that didn't educate them on what they were becoming a part of. So I think learning a critical second step. Then there has to be action. We can't just talk about these things. We actually have to do them. We have to implement changes in our lives to be more sustainable, to care for our planet. Start a garden, start recycling. When you're drawing on a piece of paper, if there's room on the back of the piece of paper, use that before putting it in the recycling bin. And the list goes on and on, but we have to equip children with actionable ways to become a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem, because kids love taking action. They love being a part of something. They love contributing, and we just have to give them opportunities to do so and stop babying them and acting like it's not, like they're not a part of this just as much as everyone else. And we all need to
Mm.
take our personal responsibility. I don't think that it's just the company's fault or that it's just our fault. I think that everybody needs to take a mutual responsibility. And part of that is even people, as they're learning about the environment, need to understand that environmental responsibility is something that they're going to have to think about in their lifetimes. And then after learning comes reflection. I think that any meaningful learning requires pausing and thinking about how it relates to you personally, thinking about how it's making you feel emotionally, thinking about how this might change your life path or your life perspective. So taking time to journal, taking time to have discussions, taking times to write things down, I think is really important to the learning process. And I would include that in probably most academic subjects. And then the last one, which I think is really, really important, is advocacy. And the reason that this is important is because if we're going to save this planet, if we're going to change the world one story at a time, then it's going to take all of us. No one's going to be able to do it alone. And if it's going to take all of us, then we're going to need to not only get good at taking care of the planet, we're going to have to get good at getting other people on board to take care of the planet as well. So helping children understand, oh, if I don't recycle in my house, how do I have that conversation with my mom? Oh, if I want to start thinking about energy conservation in our house more, how do I talk about that with my siblings without just annoying them and telling them that they're always leaving the lights on? Communication is one of the most challenging aspects of the whole sustainability space, because everyone is using different language and different buzzwords, and a lot of people have different motives and different end goals, and it creates a lot of miscommunication. So understanding, how do I communicate to someone in as simple language as possible that nature is important, it's something they should care about, and here are the things that they should start doing in their daily lives to be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. We have to know how to advocate. We have to build a team around this mission to save the planet, and we have to do it together.
Wow. Okay. That was fantastic, by the way.
Thank
And
you.
I screwed up because I came out with 6 points, but I believe that it's not infinite was part of learning.
Yeah, so
Right. Okay.
learning, action, reflection, and advocacy are the five.
Yeah, I got it. Now I got it. Because I'm like, wait a minute, there's another one. I'm not that smart, my friend. But that was absolutely fantastic. I love everything that you're doing there, and I love the perspective that you're bringing, and I love the mindfulness of it, and the I don't want to say compromise, but the understanding that it is not the conveniences, it's not the plastics, it's not the big companies. These aren't the evils. The evils are the lack of responsibility and understanding, right? Those are what we've got to get rid of. And you're right. It is partially the big companies and marketing's fault, and it's also partially the consumer's fault, etc. It's all of ours collective. Pointing a finger is wrong, unless you want to point back to like the 50s when like Life magazine was like, hey, the new disposable culture is here, and they showed families like using plastics for dinner and then just throwing it away. I mean, those were actual ads that said, hey, look, you don't need to wash your dishes anymore. Just use these plastic ones and throw it away. It's the new way of doing it. All those things.
Yeah.
Of course, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. Planned obsolescence and all that other kind of stuff, designed obsolescence, those different things. But I love exactly what I love exactly what you're doing. You guys are brand new into the market, right?
Yes, we're actually we're launching. We've done our soft launch this summer, so our first products are actually now available on our website, idori.com. That's
Right.
idori.com. And we'll be doing a hard launch in September, where we'll officially announce to the world that our first batch of Benji the Tree Hopper is available, made from
When's that? When's that
acorn.
hard launch? When's that hard launch? What date is that?
We're planning on September 15th doing our hard launch, and that's just kind of when we'll make all of our announcements, release all of our publicity about the new plushies and hardcover children's books that are available.
Fantastic. That is awesome. I love what you're doing. Can education like can school, are you actively soliciting or trying to get this into school systems, or do they go to Idoria as well, or is this just because I could go there and sign up and get and pre-order the plushies and get the books and all other kind of stuff, but do you have a separate way to communicate with institutions that want to get involved with this, or how are you going about that?
Yep, absolutely. So you can contact us right through the website. If you go to Idori.com, you can click on programs on the top menu bar and read a little bit about the Idori project. The Idori project, or the I Dream of Real Impact project, is more so the service-based side of my business, so opposed to just the plushies and the books. The Idori project is more focused on the environmental enrichment programming that I take into classrooms, libraries, and bookstores. You can book a call with me right on the website and we can talk about it. I'm currently based in Boston. I'll be moving back up to Vermont soon, so it's easiest for me to attend in person at those locations. But I'm always happy to hop on a call with any educator who's interested in the work that we're doing, and we can talk about how we could potentially either find some volunteers to help run some programming at your institution, or potentially planning a visit, or even doing some professional development where I could train someone on your team to
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
our
So
framework,
they
our curriculum.
Gotcha. That's what I was getting at. Is they can get materials and a lesson plans and this
Yes,
type of stuff
yes,
for coming forward.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I love resource sharing. I'm not trying to gatekeep any of my educational resources. I want to share this with the world as much as possible. The more children that I can get these resources in front of, the bigger the impact I'll feel that I've had. And that's ultimately what I'm after with this project.
Absolutely fantastic, Noah. I love what you're doing. I thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend. Is there
Thank you
is there
so much,
anything else that
Michael.
you want to do? Is there anything else that you wanted to get out there to everybody?
Um,
Or if not, that's fine. That's great. You've done a fantastic job, brother. But
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I guess I'll just kind of
yeah,
end off by saying thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited about launching Benji the Tree Hopper. Make sure to get yours today. They're a really perfect holiday gift for any 3 to 5 year old this upcoming holiday season. They're made from all organic materials. We're trying to do everything the right way, and they teach kids about why we need to take care of our forests and take care of our trees. This has been a lot of fun, Michael. I really appreciate you having me on the show, and
absolutely, brother.
thank you everyone who listened.
Right on, man. Everybody, peace and love. We'll catch you next time on the Sustainiacs. Have a great one.